United States is often celebrated as a nation built by immigrants. Its history is marked by waves of people from diverse backgrounds, seeking a better life and contributing to the growth and development of the country. The U.S. Census, conducted every 10 years, plays a crucial role in understanding the nation's demographic makeup and ensuring fair political representation. However, a puzzling and controversial aspect of this process is that immigrants, both documented and undocumented, are counted in the census but are not allowed to vote. This is by no means an argument for the expansion of the right to vote beyond citizens, rather a rebuttal of the unqualified counting of immigrants and their subsequent unsolicited representation. This dichotomy raises questions about representation, fairness, and the principles upon which the nation was founded. Why would a politician want illegal immigrants? The reason is much more complex than influencing individual votes. No matter how hard a politician may try, it is very difficult to please any large group. If, however, the politician maintained the ability to represent and at the same time lowered the number of people needed to vote that politician into office, then they would have achieved a win. We have all seen politicians that have districts that have all but been decimated by crime, homelessness, drug abuse, and squalor. Yet these politicians continue to be voted in time after time. Politicians gain representation through the number of undocumented immigrants without the votes needed to secure their position. The decennial census is a constitutionally mandated process that aims to count every person living in the United States. The U.S. Constitution, in Article 1, Section 2, requires an actual enumeration of the population for the purpose of apportioning seats in the House of Representatives among the states. Consequently, every individual, regardless of their citizenship status, is counted. This practice, in theory, ensures that resources are allocated and political representation is distributed based on the total population, not just citizens. Yet again and again, we see the most populated regions of the nation in the worst shape. This all-inclusive approach to the census recognizes the contributions of immigrants to American society, whether they are naturalized citizens, legal permanent residents, or undocumented individuals. It also allows for proxy representation for individuals within a district without securing the votes needed for that position. It acknowledges that immigrants are integral members of their communities, working, paying taxes, and participating in the social fabric of the nation. Those taxes are collected without the voice of the people who paid them. By counting immigrants in the census, the government aims to create an accurate snapshot of the population and allocate resources accordingly. And at the same time, utilizing the numbers to inflate representation of their own ideas under the guise of representing the immigrants. While immigrants are counted in the census, they face a significant political dilemma. They are denied the right to vote. Voting is a fundamental aspect of democratic participation and representation. It allows citizens to have a say in the government that shapes their lives and policies that affect their communities. Immigrants, on the other hand, do not have a voice in this process, despite being counted in the census. This raises several ethical and practical questions. Taxation without representation. Immigrants, like all residents, pay taxes that fund government services and programs. Yet they have no direct influence over how these funds are allocated or the policies that impact their lives. Lack of political accountability. Elected officials are accountable to their constituents through the ballot box. Immigrants' inability to vote means that politicians may not pay as much attention to their concerns, potentially leading to a lack of representation on issues like immigration reform. Undermining the principle of democracy. The United States prides itself on being a democracy that values inclusivity and representation. Denying voting rights to a significant portion of the population contradicts these principles. The fact that immigrants are counted in the census but denied the right to vote is a complex and contentious issue in the United States. It highlights the tension between the nation's inclusive principles and the legal framework governing citizenship and voting rights. While addressing this issue is challenging, it is essential to have a nuanced debate that considers the contributions of immigrants to American society and the principles of democracy upon which the nation was founded. Finding a balanced solution that aligns census counting with voting rights is crucial for a fair and representative democracy. This being said, people who are not citizens of the United States cannot shape its policies, procedures, and laws. If so, any foreign nation simply needs to send enough immigrants into the United States to influence a desired change. The practice of counting immigrants, both documented and undocumented, in the U.S. Census is well established and based on constitutional mandates and federal laws. Here are the primary sources that support this. U.S. Constitution, Article I, Section 2. The U.S. Constitution explicitly mandates a decennial census to determine the distribution of seats in the House of Representatives among the states. It calls for an actual enumeration of the population without specifying citizenship status. This constitutional provision lays the foundation for counting all residents, including immigrants. Title 13 of the United States Code. Title 13 of the U.S. Code governs the decennial census. Section 141A states that the Secretary of Commerce shall, in the year 1980s and every 10 years thereafter, take a decennial census of population as of the first day of April of such year, which date shall be known as the decennial census date, in such form and content as he may determine, including the use of sampling procedures and special surveys. This law underscores the requirement for an accurate enumeration of the entire population. The U.S. Census Bureau, which is responsible for conducting the census, adheres to the constitutional mandate of counting all residents. Their official stance is to count every person living in the United States, regardless of citizenship status. This information is available on the Census Bureau's official website and in various publications. The practice of counting all residents, regardless of citizenship, has been upheld throughout U.S. history. It ensures that resources are allocated based on the total population and that political representation in the House of Representatives is distributed equitably. While counting immigrants in the census is a long-standing practice rooted in constitutional requirements, the denial of voting rights to non-citizens is a separate and contentious issue that is determined by various state laws and federal regulations. Determining the exact number of undocumented immigrants in the United States is challenging due to the secretive and often unlawful nature of their presence. However, several organizations and government agencies have made estimates over the years. It's important to note that these estimates are not exact figures, but rather approximations based on various data sources and methodologies. Additionally, the number of undocumented immigrants can fluctuate over time due to changes in immigration policies and patterns. U.S. Department of Homeland Security, 2021. According to DHS data, there were approximately 10.5 million unauthorized immigrants living in the U.S. in January 2020s. DHS publishes estimates annually. Center for Migration Studies 2020s. The Center for Migration Studies estimated that there were 10.35 million undocumented immigrants in the U.S. as of 2019. Migration Policy Institute 2021 estimated that there were 11.4 million unauthorized immigrants in the U.S. in 2018. It has been reported that over 2.5 million undocumented immigrants have entered into the past year alone. Taxation without representation is a phrase that encapsulates a fundamental grievance that played a significant role in the lead-up to the American Revolution and the formation of the United States as an independent nation. It reflects the idea that citizens should not be subjected to taxation by a government in which they have no voice or representation. Here's a more detailed explanation. Historical context. In the 18th century, the American colonies were under British rule. The British government imposed various taxes on the colonists, including the Sugar Act, Stamp Act, and Tea Act, without allowing them to have any representation in the British Parliament. The American colonists, who considered themselves British subjects, argued that they were being unfairly taxed without their consent or the ability to influence the decisions of the British government. No say in taxation. The key issue was that the American colonists had no elected representatives in the British Parliament. Therefore, they had no direct means of participating in the legislative process, especially regarding tax policies. The British government could impose taxes on the colonies without any input from those being taxed. Grievance and unrest. This lack of representation in matters of taxation led to significant unrest and protests in the American colonies. The famous rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," captured the colonists' frustration with being subjected to taxation policies over which they had no control. Road to independence. The concept of taxation without representation became one of the driving forces behind the American Revolution. It was a central argument used by leaders like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry to mobilize support for independence from British rule. The colonists believed that they should have the right to self-governance and the ability to determine their own taxation policies through elected representatives. Legacy. The phrase taxation without representation is still relevant in modern political discussions. It underscores the importance of representative democracy, where citizens have a voice in the decisions made by their government, including tax policies. A representative democracy does not mean that politicians are allotted the benefits of a constituency without the responsibility of their needs. Politicians are taking advantage of the system to ensure they maintain power without the danger of being voted out. We have established that immigrants cannot be allotted the right to vote without citizenship. Citizenship cannot be given without the assurances that those who seek it do so for the betterment of society. This leaves the only choice is that of selective citizenship and controlled immigration. It also serves as a reminder of the historical struggles for self-determination and the principles upon which the United States was founded. In 1776, the American colonies declared their independence from British rule, leading to the formation of the United States and the adoption of a constitution that established a system of government with elected representatives. This ensured that the new nation would not replicate the grievances of taxation without representation that had fueled the revolution. Representation and the ability to vote are closely linked in democratic systems, but they are not always synonymous. Voting remains a fundamental and direct way for individuals to participate in the democratic process and have their voices heard. In many democratic systems, the act of voting is seen as a critical means of expressing one's preferences and holding elected officials accountable. The absence of voting rights can limit an individual's ability to directly influence electoral outcomes and policy decisions. The allocation of congressional seats in the United States, specifically in the House of Representatives, is determined by a process known as apportionment. The fundamental principle behind this process is that each congressional district should represent approximately the same number of people to ensure equal representation. Here's how population determines congressional seats. Census data. The process begins with the decennial census, which is conducted every 10 years by the U.S. Census Bureau. The census aims to count every person residing in the United States, regardless of their citizenship status. It collects detailed demographic information, including the population of each state and its geographic subdivisions. Total House seats. The U.S. House of Representatives is constitutionally limited to 435 seats. This number has remained constant since 1911, when the Apportionment Act was enacted, setting the size of the House. However, the number of seats allocated to each state can change after each census based on shifts in population. Apportionment formula. The apportionment of House seats is determined using a mathematical formula called equal proportions method or Huntington-Hill method. This formula allocates the 435 seats among the 50 states based on their respective populations. The formula aims to achieve a balance where each district represents, as closely as possible, an equal number of people. Minimum 1 seat per state. According to the U.S. Constitution, Article I, Section 2, each state is guaranteed at least 1 seat in the House of Representatives, regardless of its population. This means that even the least populous states have 1 congressional district. Remaining seats. After allocating seats to the states, the formula may leave some seats unallocated. These unallocated seats are distributed among the states with the highest remaining fractional populations until all 435 seats are assigned. Redistricting. Once the number of congressional seats for each state is determined, it is up to the state legislatures to redraw their congressional districts to reflect the new apportionment. This process, known as redistricting, occurs after each census and aims to ensure that each congressional district has roughly the same population. Effects of population changes. If a state's population grows significantly between censuses, it may gain additional seats in the House. Conversely, if a state's population decreases relative to other states, it may lose seats. This reallocation of seats helps maintain the principle of equal representation as much as possible. Census accuracy. The accuracy of the decennial census is crucial in determining the distribution of congressional seats. An undercounting or overcounting of the population in a particular state can lead to inaccuracies in the apportionment process. So we know the problem and how it was created. We know that the politicians that are in a position to correct it do not have a vested interest in doing so. We know that this problem will continue to expand. So what is the answer?